What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Realms of Metal. Eddie here, back with you from my happy place. Actually, it's the happiest place on earth. It ain't fucking Disney World. It's right here in the woods in PA, in my metal room. And thanks for joining me today. Shout out to everybody who's watching the videos, liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I really appreciate that very much. And I want to talk some death today. Now, this is a video I've been wanting to do like since the inception of this channel. When Ant and I started back in January, it was one of the first things that popped in my head. Like, what are we going to talk about? Death has always been one of my favorite bands. And not only do I feel like they're one of the most important bands in death metal and extreme metal, but just heavy metal in general, and it's a band that deserves to be celebrated and talked about. They have 7 full lengths spanning from 1987 all the way to 1998. Lineup changes with every record. Call Chuck, the Mustaine of death metal if you want. And I don't know if it was a case of him not getting along with other musicians or other people. Maybe in the beginning there was some of that going on, but I feel like as he went on, I think he just wanted to kind of surround himself with the best musicians possible in order to achieve the best record possible. Like Chuck Schuldiner was a musician, and to see where he started, with Mantis and the Scream Bloody Gore, all the way out to the Sound of Perseverance, like how he progressed as a musician, as a guitar player, as a vocalist. He's a musician's musician, and I really think that that was his goal, to get the best product possible. Based on videos I've seen, interviews, stuff I've read about Chuck over the years. He was always an intriguing guy to me. And like he seemed like the nicest guy ever. Like when you watch his interviews and stuff, like he did one interview when he was wearing a shirt with like cats on it. He just seemed like a cool guy, a chill guy. And I love that about him. And I always ask other death metal musicians, other musicians, like, did you ever get a chance to meet Chuck? What kind of guy was he? Because it just intrigues me. Like I asked Vincent Crowley when I interviewed him like a month or so ago on the channel. Check that out. Great guy. Um, Great musician as well. I asked him about Chuck, and we talked about that for a couple minutes, and like that stuff always intrigues me. So 7 full lengths, lineup changes throughout. Um, So let's do a brief history on the band. Now, I'm not going to get into Chuck, the man, the musician, so much on this video. I'm going to kind of focus on the band. I feel like as I researched this stuff and based on stuff that I already knew, I really kind of want to do another video solely on Chuck himself, so I'm going to save that for another video. I'm going to focus on the full lengths and the lineup changes in this one and all that stuff. So brief history on Death, for those who don't know. Formed in 1983 under the name Mantis, with Chuck Schuldiner on guitar, Rick Ross on guitar, Cam Lee on drums and vocals. Rick Ross, Cam Lee, uh, way up here on the death metal ladder for me, like 2 more of my death metal heroes. Absolutely love those guys and what they have brought to the table, to the genre over the years. And, 2 legends, along with Chuck. So with that lineup, Cam and Rick, Chuck started to write songs that were released on a bunch of rehearsal tapes back in 1984. Those tapes, along with the Death by Metal demo, circulated through the tape trader world. Soon after in 84, Chuck dissolved Mantis and started a new band under the name Death. Now, in an interview with Tim Amar, who was the vocalist for his other band, Control Denied, who actually passed away in February of this year. So rest in peace, Tim Amar. An article in 2010, he stated that Chuck renamed the band Death in order to turn his experience of the death of his brother Frank, which happened years earlier, into something positive. So that's where the name came from, according to Tim Amar. In 1984, the Reign of Terror demo was released with the same lineup. 85, the Infernal Death demo was released with that same lineup. Later on in that year, Rick Ross and Cam Lee were out of the band. Chuck moved to San Francisco and recruited DRI drummer Eric Brecht and recorded the Back from the Dead demo, but supposedly was not happy with the way things were going, and he actually moved back to Florida shortly after. In 86, Chuck got an invite from Canadian thrash band Slaughter to join, which he accepted and actually moved to Canada. That didn't really work out for him. So he was only there like a little bit, maybe even a few weeks. And he moved back to Florida and then again moved back to San Francisco, where he hooked up with Chris Reifert, who would go on to be one of the founding members of Autopsy, right? They recorded the 1986 Mutilation demo, which led to the deal with Combat Records. And then in 1987, we got this masterpiece, Scream Bloody Gore. Close that. Scream Bloody Gore, released May 25th, 1987 on Combat Records. First full length. Chuck Schuldiner on vocals, guitars, and bass. Chris Reifert on drums. Produced by Randy Burns and Chuck Schuldiner. Cover art by Ed Repka. A lot of horror-inspired songs on this one. Like Zombie Ritual was inspired by the movie Zombie. Regurgitated Guts was inspired by City of the Living Dead. Torn to Pieces by Reanimator. Evil Dead, obviously Evil Dead. Bonus tracks for the CD were Beyond the Unholy Grave and Land of No Return. Beyond the Unholy Grave was influenced by the movie The Beyond. And amazing record. The song Evil Dead, I believe, is one of the greatest death metal songs of all time. It was covered by a ton of bands, like Asheron covered it, Vincent Crowley again, God Dethroned covered it, Unleashed covered it, among others. But to me, it's probably in the top 3 greatest death metal songs of all time, so killer record, absolutely essential. First death metal album. To me, it was kind of always Possessed, Seven Churches, but there's a debate, and this music is all subjective, so between this record, Seven Churches, Necrophagia, Seasons of the Dead, what was really the first death metal record? Who the fuck knows, and who the fuck cares? They're all 3 amazing records, and here's where the roots of death metal started, between these 3 bands, in my opinion. So, like I said, I always kind of viewed Possessed as the first, but it's all subjective. So, Scream Bloody Gore. So let's go to Death's second full length, which was Leprosy. It was released on November 16th, 1988 on Combat Records again. The lineup on this one would be Chuck Schuldiner, guitar, vocals, and he does the bass on this. Rick Ross on guitar, back in the band, and Bill Andrews on drums. Now, this was Rick Ross's only Death full length that he was on. This was produced by Dan Johnson, engineered by Scott Burns, mixed and mastered by Michael Fuller, cover art again by Ed Repka. Terry Butler was credited for the bass on this, but Chuck Schuldiner actually played it. So another amazing record right here. Not a bad song on this record. Like, actually, all the songs are good. Leprosy, Born Dead, Forgotten Past, Left to Die, Pull the Plug, Open Casket, Primitive Ways, Choke on It. Solid as fuck record. Every song is good. Do I think there's any great songs on here? Like, I don't know. Probably Pull the Plug, and probably, Leprosy and Born Dead are right there too. But solid as fuck record. 1988's Leprosy. Let's go to 1990 and Spiritual Healing. This was released February 16th, 1990 on Combat, their 3rd full length. And the lineup on this one is Chuck Schuldiner on guitar and vocals, Bill Andrews on drums, which was his last record with the band, Terry Butler on bass, which is his only death record pretty much, and James Murphy on guitar, his only death record. And incidentally, later on the same year, he was on Obituary's Cause of Death. And then the following year, he was on the Cancer record as well. So, Spiritual Healing, produced and mixed by Scott Burns, engineered by John Cervini and Mike Gowan, cover art again by Ed Repka. This was his last cover for the band. And this is kind of like a more dynamic, slightly more melodic album than Leprosy. And this was actually my first Death record as a kid, so I have very fond memories of it. Absolutely love it. Living Monstrosity is one of my favorite Death songs, definitely top three, at least. There's so many amazing Death tracks. Altering the Future, very good. Defensive Personalities, Within the Mind, Spiritual Healing, Low Life, Genetic Reconstruction, Killing Spree is an underrated track. So, Death Spiritual Healing, 1990, third full length from Chuck Schuldiner and company. Let's go to 1991 and let's talk about Human. This was released October 22nd, 1991 on Relativity Records. New lineup on this one. You got Chuck Schuldiner on guitar and vocals, Paul Masvidal and Sean Reiner. Paul Masvidal's guitar, Sean Reiner's drums, who incidentally went on to be in Cynic. Funny story about Cynic. I went to New York City to see Cannibal Corpse way back when the Bleeding album was released. And it was at this place called the Limelight. It was like an old church that was converted into this club. It was a fucking wild ass club. There was like balconies and shit. And I was on the balcony watching Cynic, and standing next to me was Terrence Hobbs of Suffocation, right? Which I didn't realize until I looked over at him. And he looked over at me, and we're watching Cynic play. And I looked over at him like, this is fucking good. And he said to me, like, these exact words, sounds just like the record. Like, amazing performance from the guys from Cynic that night. It was Cannibal Corpse with Cynic and Sinister. So just a little side note, when I think about Cynic, that's always what I think of, watching it with Terrence Hobbs, So, and then you had Steve DiGiorgio on bass with this one. So produced by Scott Burns and Chuck Schuldiner, mastered by Michael Fuller, cover art by Renee Meville. Video for Lack of Comprehension. I remember that video being played on the old Headbangers Ball. It was always a special ball when that one came on. Like, I used to keep my VCR like ready to record certain videos, and that was one of the videos I had recorded on my VHS tape, so I could replay the videos. And like, I'm like, whenever they're about to play a song, I'm like, am I gonna hit record? Am I gonna hit record? So cool ass memories of that. Now, this record was kind of the start of the more progressive technical shift for Death and for Chuck Schuldiner. Steve DiGiorgio left after the recording, but would return for the next one, which was Individual Thought Pattern. So, Death's Human, another amazing record. Flattening of Emotions, Suicide Machine, Together as One, Secret Face, Lack of Comprehension, See-Through Dreams, Cosmic Sea, Vacant Planets. This one has the bonus track, God of Thunder, the Kiss cover, which is a killer cover, by the way. So, Death's Human, absolutely essential. All these records are essential. If you don't have them, go out and pick them up. You're not going to be disappointed. So, like, the progressive technical era of Death is so important. Like, it influenced so many bands. And what kind of sets Death apart for me is the songwriting. Like, you could be the most talented technical player that there is, and you can play those technical progressive songs, but like, they have to be good songs. I like good songs, and that's what Death did and Chuck did. Like, I feel like he surrounded himself with these amazing musicians, and they wrote good songs, and that's what kind of sets Death apart for me when it comes to the technical progressive style of death metal. So Death's Human, absolutely must have. So let's go to the fifth full length. This came out June 22nd, 1993 on Relativity, Individual Thought Patterns. This lineup was Chuck Schuldiner on guitar and vocals, Steve DiGiorgio on bass, Gene Hoglan on drums from Dark Angel, other guitar player, Andy LaRoque from King Diamond, one of my metal heroes, always has been. His only record with Death. And that's why I said, I always felt like Chuck tried to surround himself with the best musicians possible. Andy LaRoque and Gene Hoglan on this record, along with Steve DiGiorgio. Like, that's kind of the feeling that I get with Chuck, So, produced Scott Burns and Chuck Schuldiner, engineered by Scott Burns, cover art again by Renee Meville, video for The Philosopher, another classic Death track, continues that progressive technical style that Death did on the record before this one. So overactive imagination, inhuman form, jealousy, trapped in a corner, nothing is everything, mentally blind, individual thought patterns, destiny, out of touch, the philosopher. And supposedly the word is that Andy LaRocque actually improvised a lot of the solos on this record. You know, it's like I said, amazing musician. I'm a huge Andy LaRocque fan, King Diamond fan. So love that he's on this record and always have, you know. So whenever I put this record on, I actually think of Andy LaRocque, you know, and I listen to the solos and I picture him playing them, you know, just one of the things I think of in my twisted little mind, but a good thought, you know. So individual thought patterns, fifth full length, 1993. So let's go to March 21st, 1995. This is the only Death record I don't have on vinyl. Symbolic came out on Roadrunner. This lineup was Chuck Schuldiner on guitar and vocals, Gene Hoglan back for drums, Bobby Coble on guitar, who was with a band called Azrael, his only record that he did with Death, and Kelly Conlon on bass, who was with Monstrosity, and I think he was with Pessimist for a little bit too. So produced by Jim Morris and Chuck Schuldiner, mastered by George Marino, cover art again by Renee Meville. Originally supposed to be titled Symbolic Acts, you know, but instead, I guess they changed it to Symbolic. The company swayed him to do that. I mean, if you listen to the first track, you know, Symbolic, it's right in the song, Symbolic Acts, you know, so I could see where Chuck got that title from, but it ended up being called just Symbolic. Still a technical progressive record, you know, but incorporated like a little bit more melody on this one, in my opinion. And it was actually supposed to be the last Death album, you know, so luckily it wasn't. We actually got, you know, one more, but you know, Chuck was, you know, the musician Chuck, you know, he was doing Control Denied, and who knows where he would have landed and what he would have done if he had, you know, lived, you know. So I mean, we'll talk about his death in a little bit, but you know, it's such a tragedy that we lost him. And like, think of all the music that we lost. I mean, I think I try to think about it positively with, you know, the music that we gained from him, but he was only 34 when he passed, you know, so we lost a lot too, you know, so it's something I think about a lot. So Death, Symbolic, 1995, sixth full length. So let's go to the last Death full length. It was The Sound of Perseverance, final full length, August 31st, 1998. It was released on Nuclear Blast. So on this lineup, you've got Chuck Schuldiner on guitar and vocals, Shannon Ham on guitar, Scott Clendenin on bass, Richard Christie on drums, which are all his Control Denied guys. You know, I think Nuclear Blast wanted to squeeze another Death release out of them so they can market it, you know, like a record company thing. And this is what we got. And I'm glad that we did, man, because this is my favorite Death record. And it kind of always was. And I just feel like this record, like, the songs are so memorable. It's the perfect example of mixing technicality and progressive aspects and good songwriting. You know, I love everything about it. I love the guitar tone. Just 10 out of 10 for me. Produced by Jim Morris and Chuck Schuldiner, engineered, mixed, and mastered by Jim Morris. Cover art by Travis Smith, who did cover art for like Defiance, Amorphous, King Diamond, Overkill, Iced Earth, a ton of bands. Tracks Spirit Crusher, Bite the Pain, A Moment of Clarity were intended for the Control Denied album, but they ended up on this one instead. And like I said, when Chuck signed with Nuclear Blast, he agreed with the label to do one more Death album, and this was it. Scavenger of Human Sorrow, Bite the Pain, Spirit Crusher, Story to Tell, Flesh and the Power It Holds, Voice of the Soul, To Forgive is to Suffer, Moment of Clarity, Painkiller. It's a Judas Priest cover. Voice of the Soul is one of the most beautiful instrumentals I've ever heard. I love everything about it. You know, check out Voice of the Soul. So there you have it. Those were Death's 7 full lengths, all amazing records, you know, all records that everybody should have in their collection. Just another brief thing on Chuck. Like I said, I want to do another video on Chuck, but in 1999 he was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he ended up passing away. Without me getting too much into it, I'll do it in another video. He ended up passing away on December 13th, 2001, at the age of 34. Now, what a tragedy, right? Like, what a loss for the death metal, heavy metal community. That was really the first death that really hit me hard as a metal fan, because like if you watch my other videos, and Justice for All was the record that made me a metalhead, right? So that's when I was totally engrossed in it. And that was really the first death that I can remember that kind of hit me hard, And I mean, I can go back to Cliff Burton in '86, which, like I wasn't an avid metal fan back then, so it didn't really affect me. I didn't really realize the importance of Cliff Burton until I went to the back catalog and, found out about the history of Metallica. Another one would be Randy Rhoads in '82, same kind of deal. So as a metal fan, I have bad memories of hearing about Chuck's passing when it happened, so I was very upset, and, it hit me hard, so I feel like Chuck Schuldiner, the man, the musician, the Death catalog, the Control Denied record, should be celebrated. And I listen to all those records all the time. And, not to sound like Office Space, Michael Bolton, but I celebrate the man's entire catalog. It's the truth. And an absolute legend. And one of my favorites, always was and always will be. So there you have it, the 7 full lengths of Death, all the records, all the lineup changes, kind of a brief history on the band. And I'll go into Chuck Schuldiner a little bit on another video. I just want to do one on him because I feel like he deserves it. He's just one of those guys. So thanks for hanging with me on the Realms of Metal. I appreciate you all. Thank you for watching the videos, commenting on the videos, liking the videos, subscribing. Thanks for anybody who's bought a shirt or any merch in the store that we link. The actually designs are absolutely killer. People are sending me messages. I love this shirt, blah, blah. So I appreciate that. We don't make a lot on them here. Make like $1 per shirt, but it goes right back into the channel, So again, thank you all, and we'll see you guys again real soon.